They thought he was just another driver. Polite, prompt, quiet. The kind of man who didn't make trouble and didn't attract any. Marco Ruiz drove a black 2019 Toyota Camry through the streets of San Diego 6 nights a week. He picked up airport passengers, drunk couples leaving dive bars, businessmen catching red-eye flights. He wore a polo shirt and kept his car spotless. Taped a pack of gum to the dash, charged his phone, smiled when spoken to. And behind that smile was a man running one of the most lucrative cash operations the DEA had ever seen. Because Marco Ruiz wasn't just an Uber driver. He was a smuggler, a silent mule for the Sinaloa cartel, trusted to move over $1 million a week in laundered currency, hidden in the frame of his car. He never asked questions, never told anyone. And then, one night in January, he vanished. No struggle, no call, no sign of a body. Just an empty car in Tijuana, and a mystery that's haunted law enforcement for over a year. Subscribe for real, true crime stories with twists you won't see coming, where not every disappearance ends in answers. Because sometimes, the ones who drive in silence leave without a sound. Marco Ruiz was 34, a father of 2, recently divorced. No criminal record, no flashy lifestyle, no red flags. To his neighbors, he was a good man who kept to himself. To his kids, he was a dependable dad who always brought home pancakes on Sundays. To his ex-wife, Carla, he was different, still kind, but distant. They'd been married for 7 years, separated quietly. No fights, no screaming, just too many late nights, too many silences that stretched too long. Carla thought he was working too hard, that the pressure of raising kids while driving all night had worn him down. But she never suspected what was really going on. Because Marco had built a second life, and he had done it perfectly. He kept 2 phones, one registered in his name, the other untraceable. He kept 2 sets of digital accounts, one for Uber and one for the encrypted crypto wallets he accessed from a laptop hidden under the floorboards of his apartment. He kept his car clean, tires rotated, oil changed, dashcam wiped weekly, and the compartment, designed by cartel engineers, was invisible to the naked eye, built into the frame, pressure-locked, radiation-shielded to block scanning. Inside, wrapped bundles of U.S. currency, tightly packed, shrink-wrapped. Each run carried up to $3 million. Marco made these trips twice a week. He crossed the U.S.-Mexico border under the radar, always after midnight, always through Otay Mesa. The secret? He didn't carry drugs, only money. It made him invisible to the agencies looking the other way. To them, he was a harmless driver. To the cartel, he was irreplaceable. He didn't party, didn't steal, didn't talk. And for 18 months, he ran flawless operations. Until he made one mistake. It was December 27th, 2023. Marco had just returned from a run, but the numbers didn't add up. The ledger was off by 2 million. That may not sound like much, unless you're laundering it for the most violent cartel on earth. A week later, Marco told his brother Esteban, "They're watching the math, and I think, I messed up. No one knows what exactly happened. Some say Marco skimmed from the top. Others say the error wasn't his, that someone else in the chain botched the count. But the cartel doesn't care who made the mistake, only that someone did." By January 10th, Marco was changing his routine. He stopped crossing at Otay Mesa. He disabled his GPS, switched burner phones, swapped license plates. He began backing into driveways instead of pulling in. And he started checking his rear view every few minutes. Carla noticed it too. When he dropped off the kids that week, he barely made eye contact. He hugged Mia tighter than usual. And to his son Luca, he whispered, "Keep looking after your mom, okay?" On January 14th, Marco left for what looked like a normal Uber shift. He accepted a pickup request from a customer named JJ at 11:37 p.m. The location? A smart and final parking lot near Chula Vista. At 11:42, dashcam footage shows Marco pulling in. The car idled. 2 men approached, both in dark hoodies. No words exchanged. One sat in front, one in back. Marco pulled away. At 11:58, the car crossed the border into Tijuana. And then, silence. His phone went offline. No pings, No messages. At 7:14 a.m., a rancher in Tijuana found Marco's Camry on a dirt road just outside town. The doors were unlocked, keys in the ignition. No blood, no signs of struggle, no luggage, no Marco. Everything wiped clean. The vehicle was returned to U.S. authorities. Scanned, processed. Nothing. Not a fingerprint. Not a trace. Carla filed a missing persons report that afternoon. She told police he'd never go anywhere without texting her, that he promised to bring a birthday cake for Mia that morning, that he'd already bought it. She found a receipt. The police first treated it like a carjacking, but then Detective Arturo Medina got the logs. Marco had crossed into Mexico 37 times in the past year, all at night, all with two unidentified passengers. Always the same route. The DEA was brought in. They matched Marco's car to an ongoing investigation into cross-border currency smuggling. They flagged over $38 million that had moved in the last 18 months. But Marco never touched it. He had no offshore accounts in his name, no luxury purchases, no homes, no flashy lifestyle. Then they found Esteban. Marco's brother had access to multiple cold wallets, each holding significant crypto assets. Under pressure, Esteban cracked. He admitted Marco had used him to mask the funds, said the money had been flowing fast and clean until mid-December. Then Marco changed. He stopped sleeping, started carrying a gun, said he was being followed. Esteban begged him to stop, but Marco only said, "It's too late. I'm in it too deep. There's no exit ramp anymore." 3 weeks after his disappearance, a white van was stopped at the Tecate border. Inside were burner phones, drives, surveillance footage. One SD card was marked MR. It showed Marco, seated across from a man the DEA identified as Luis Ortega, known in the cartel world as El Cura, the priest, a former accountant who vanished in 2022. In the video, Ortega says, "You moved 13. You were supposed to move 15. That's 2 missing. That's not just a mistake. That's disrespect." Marco says nothing. Ortega leans in. When a math doesn't add up, they don't ask questions. They send cleaners. The footage ends. No one knows what happened next. Some believe Marco was executed that night. Others think he faked his own death, vanished to South America with a portion of the money. But the final clue was chilling. 13 hours after Marco vanished, a final encrypted signal ping from Belize. Then nothing. No further pings. No passport usage. No sightings. No body. The FBI believes he's dead. The DEA isn't so sure. And Carla? She received a letter 2 weeks later. No return address. Inside were 6 birthday cards, one for each year until Mia turns 13. Each card said the same thing. "Love you. Always. Dad." The crypto remains partially unclaimed. Some wallets are still live. Watching. Waiting. Esteban is serving 5 years for obstruction. The investigation is officially closed. But the questions haven't stopped. How does a man make $1 million a week and disappear without a trace? How do you outrun the people who never stop watching? And how do you vanish when every camera in the world is looking for you? They thought Marco Ruiz was just another rideshare driver. But he wasn't just moving passengers. He was moving millions. Until the night he didn't come home. And now, there's just an empty car, an encrypted wallet, and a family still waiting for answers. Marco Ruiz had vanished without a trace. His black Toyota Camry was found abandoned on a dirt road near Tijuana. Keys still in the ignition. Wallet untouched. No struggle. No note. No body. But a single smudge of dried blood beneath the driver's seat told a different story. By the time Mexican federal police arrived, the locals had already crowded around. They whispered about cartel retribution, but nobody asked questions. Not in Tijuana. Not about someone like Marco. Back in San Diego, Carla Ruiz stood in the living room staring at her husband's untouched coffee mug, the one he'd filled every morning before leaving for work. Only now it was still full. Cold. Luca, their 12-year-old son, kept checking the window. Mia, the youngest, wouldn't speak at all. Carla reported Marco missing within 24 hours, but she didn't tell them everything. She left out the late-night calls, the stacks of cash in a laundry bag last month, The way Marco had started sleeping with his phone under his pillow. She thought it would protect him. She was wrong. Homeland Security intercepted the case 3 days later. Not because they cared about a missing Uber driver, but because 2 hours before Marco vanished, four encrypted servers at a federal port checkpoint had gone offline. Someone had turned off the cameras. Manually. Inside the files, names, dates, license plate logs of every car entering and leaving the border over the last 6 months. And 37 of those plates were tied to Marco Ruiz. Enter Special Agent Jordan Mayfield, a cybercrimes investigator with a background in cartel trafficking patterns. Mayfield reviewed Marco's Uber logs. At first, they looked normal, but deeper analysis showed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday between 1:15 and 2:30 a.m., Marco's phone would go offline for exactly 47 minutes. Every time, the strange part, his Uber route during those windows would still show en route, as if the app had been spoofed. Someone had cloned his phone. Mayfield's team found something else. A storage unit in Chula Vista, rented under a fake name, but paid with Carla's credit card. They got a warrant. Inside, for burner phones, a damaged drone, a fingerprint-free toolbox, and 6 SIM cards still in packaging. No drugs, no money. But one of the burner phones had a partial message saved in drafts. El Courier moved the next drop to, and then nothing. The last metadata ping from that phone? 10:27 p.m., the night Marco disappeared. The deeper they dug, the darker it got. Marco hadn't been working alone. He was part of a small but tightly run operation moving cash, pills, and stolen IDs back and forth across the border, without ever touching the merchandise. He was a driver, but not for Uber, for something bigger. It was a courier ring, a hybrid network of gig workers with no criminal records, no priors, no cartel tattoos. They used Uber as a front, but the cartel used them as insulation. No one knew anyone else's name. No one asked questions. The only rule, never miss a drop. Marco had never missed. Until now. On day 11, Mayfield got a hit. Security footage from a toll booth 78 miles east of Tijuana showed a figure matching Marco's build walking barefoot along the shoulder of a highway. No car, no phone, no shoes. The timestamp, 3:08 a.m., 6 hours after his car was found. But the clip was grainy, and the man never turned toward the camera. Was it Marco? Or was someone sending a message? Then came the twist no one expected. A USB drive was anonymously dropped at the FBI field office in El Centro. Inside were two things. One, a 19-minute video of Marco Ruiz, bruised, gagged, and tied to a chair. Two, a map with 3 red XS. In the video, Marco said nothing. He stared at the camera, eyes swollen, mouth bleeding. A masked man stepped in a frame and said, "This is what happens when you steal from the saints." Then the screen cut to black. The 3 red XS marked remote areas along the Arizona border. Search teams deployed within hours. At the first site, nothing. The second, a pair of burned gloves. At the third, a shallow grave. Empty. But 10 feet away, buried beneath a piece of plywood, they found a sealed Ziploc bag. Inside, Marco's wedding ring. No fingerprints. No blood. Just the ring. Clean. Carla Ruiz was brought in again. She watched the video in silence. When it ended, she whispered, "He said he was out. He told me it was over." Agent Mayfield leaned forward. "Did he ever tell you what El Courier means?" She nodded. The priest. That's what they called the man who gave the orders. The one no one met. Mayfield already knew that, because 2 hours earlier, they found a suicide note on the body of a man dumped in a motel bathtub in Ensenada. Inside his wallet, a business card that said simply, "El Courier, your sins are mine." But the body wasn't Luis Ortega. The fingerprints didn't match. And Luis Ortega was last seen boarding a private plane from Mexico City 2 days later. Alive. As the investigation stalled, rumors swirled. That Marco had flipped. That he'd stolen money. That he'd run. But none of it made sense. He had no exit plan. No offshore accounts. No known accomplices. Just a car. A ring. A video. And silence. 2 months later, a human foot washed up on a Baja beach. Size 10. Left side. DNA inconclusive. But Carla recognized the scar on the ankle. Same one Marco got when he fell off his bike in high school. It was all they had. Authorities issued a death certificate. The case was closed. But then, 6 weeks after the funeral, Luca got a message on a private gaming server. It was just one sentence. Tell your mom I kept the promise. The sender ID traced to a server in Panama, and the IP spoofed through a satellite link. It was either a hoax, or Marco Ruiz wasn't dead. No new evidence has surfaced since. The cartel's Courier ring was eventually dismantled, but its leaders were never caught. Luis Ortega, aka El Cura, remains at large. No photos, no prints, no records, just a name and a trail of bodies. Carla Ruiz never remarried. Mia still draws pictures of her dad every week. Luca, now 15, spends most of his time building encrypted apps and studying cybersecurity. He says one day he'll find out what happened, one way or another. Because in the world Marco drove through, sometimes the only way out is to disappear. Completely. By the time the FBI traced the bank accounts, the money was gone. Not just transferred, not withdrawn, gone. The shell companies Marco used were ghost trails, registered to fake names, dissolved within days, scattered across countries where extradition laws were thin and bribes were thick. But then came a strange break. A lead that didn't make sense. A man in Cartagena, Colombia, thin, jittery, mid-40s, walked into the U.S. consulate, claiming he had information about the American who vanished with cartel cash. He wouldn't give a name, but he had details. About the Camry, about the compartment, about a man called El Mensajero, the messenger. And that's when it hit agents like a punch to the ribs. Marco wasn't just running cash. He was delivering messages, coordinating handoffs, transporting more than money, sometimes people, sometimes things that couldn't be listed in case files. But if that was true, it changed everything. He wasn't just a pawn. He was a courier with keys to the whole board. Flashback, 2022. Agent Karina Bell was reviewing hours of customs footage from Laredo, Texas. Over and over, she saw the same routine. A black Camry, always arriving just before dusk, always entering the checkpoint with nothing in the trunk. But one frame stuck out. June 11th. The camera captured Marco's car at 7:14 p.m. He was alone in the front seat. Calm, focused, but in the back seat was a shadow. Bell enhanced the image. It wasn't luggage. It was a person. No record of entry. No follow-up. The log said no passengers declared. Whoever that was, they weren't supposed to be there. And now it raised the most chilling possibility. Had Marco smuggled more than money? Had he helped traffic people across borders for a price? Was that his real job? Back in New York, Marco's mother received a phone call at 3:06 a.m. Unknown number. No voice. Just a recording of ocean waves. She broke down. She said Marco used to take his kids to Coney Island, even when he couldn't afford it. That sound, those waves, it meant something. But the FBI couldn't trace the call. It pinged from a prepaid SIM routed through Guatemala. A dead end. Again. Then came a body. August 4th, 2024. Washed up on the shores of Isla de la Juventud, Cuba. Male. Late 30s. Signs of torture. Burn marks. Missing fingertips. No ID. But in the pocket was a gold pendant. Marco's mother identified it immediately. It was his father's chain, passed down to him after the funeral. The body was decomposed beyond DNA certainty. But the pendant was enough. At least, they thought it was. 1 week later, someone accessed Marco's encrypted cloud drive from an IP address in Belize. That drive had been locked since the day he disappeared. Inside it, photos, coordinates, drop points, voice memos, a full map of smuggling routes running from Juarez to Queens, labeled not with names, but symbols. And in the final audio file, Marco's voice. If you're hearing this, then I'm either dead or worse. They told me I was untouchable, that I'd be protected, but no one's untouchable. Not when you're carrying secrets this big. I'm sorry, Mom. Tell my kids I tried. The file was time-stamped 3 days after the body was found. So if that wasn't Marco in Cuba, who was it? And if Marco was still alive, where was he now? Theories multiplied. Some said he flipped, turned informant, was living under witness protection. Others said the cartel staged his death as a message to other runners. Loyalty is silence. But Agent Bell believed something else. That Marco was on the move, still running, but not from them, from the people he once worked for. In Miami, a cartel accountant named Javier Solano was arrested after a DEA raid. When questioned, he said only this: there are 3 ways to leave the cartel: prison, grave, or if you're like Marco, you disappear so well that even the devil can't find you. But Belle didn't buy it. She believed Marco left a trail, not a paper trail, a digital one, not for the authorities, for his kids. September 2024. A burner phone was found on a Greyhound bus heading toward El Paso. Inside the photo album, pictures of a quiet beach, 2 children playing in the sand, and in the background, barely visible, a man with sunglasses, a beard, and a scar above his left eye. Marco had a scar. Same spot, but the resolution was grainy. Could have been anyone. Still, Belle held on to it, because it meant one thing: the story wasn't over. The FBI quietly opened a case file labeled FUG 4421, Marco Rivera. Status: active fugitive. Threat level: unknown. Resources: limited. Because officially, Marco Rivera was dead. Unofficially, he might be the only man alive who knew how the U.S. cartel courier system really worked. And if he ever surfaced, he'd either be arrested or silenced. The last update came from a gas station in Sonora, Mexico. Surveillance footage showed a man paying cash for a burner laptop. The clerk said he spoke perfect English, but something about him felt off, like he was always listening for footsteps. The man left behind no prints, only a receipt and a scribbled note left in a trash can. Trust no one, especially the ones who say they're here to help. As of today, there is no confirmed sighting of Marco Rivera. No bank activity, no travel records, no calls. But every few months, a new clue surfaces. A digital breadcrumb, an old photo, a disguised login, a whisper in a jailhouse. Someone, somewhere, is still covering his tracks. And whether Marco is dead, hiding, or planning something even bigger, one thing's clear: the driver who made $1 million a week for the cartel didn't vanish by accident. He vanished with a plan. Subscribe to Dark Case Files for more real stories with twists you'll never see coming.